With a body better suited to basketball, Ted Hendricks did not look like a normal football player. With an often irreverent manner at linebacker, Ted Hendricks did not always act like a normal football player.
1976. Oakland Raiders locker room. Ted Hendricks walked in. He had a saw in his hand, a real saw, and he started cutting his teammates' locker. Everyone laughed, but there was a question. Was this a joke, or was he really crazy? Because on the field, Ted Hendricks was an uncontrolled beast. He was called Mad Stork, the crazy stork. But off the field, some people described him as the smartest player in the NFL. So which was real? Was Mad Stork a persona, or did Ted Hendricks really have a dual personality? Don't forget to follow and turn on notifications, because this is the story of the dark truth behind an NFL legend and the thin line between crazy and genius. Ted Hendricks was drafted by the Baltimore Colts in 1970, second round, 33rd pick, linebacker position. But Hendricks wasn't a normal linebacker. He was 6'7", 210 pounds. For most linebackers, this was too skinny. Normal linebackers were shorter and heavier, stronger. But Hendricks was different, tall, thin, like a bird. And his movement was strange too. His arms were long, his legs were long. When he ran, he looked like he was flying. In his first practice, the coaches were surprised. "This kid can't play linebacker," they said. "Too skinny, too tall, running backs will crush him." But then Hendricks started playing, and they noticed something. Hendricks was fast, very fast. And his long arms were an advantage, because he could block passes, he could reach quarterbacks, and nobody could stop him. In his first season, he had 8 sacks, incredible for a rookie. And his teammates gave him a nickname, the Mad Stork, the Crazy Stork. Why? Stork? Because he looked like a stork. Long legs, long neck, thin body. But why mad? Crazy? Because Hendricks played uncontrolled on the field. He didn't follow rules. He didn't follow the system. Coaches gave him a position, but Hendricks played his own way. "I follow the ball," he'd say. "I don't care about the system." And it worked. Because Hendricks played instinctively. He didn't think. He just moved. And opponents couldn't predict him. But the Mad Stork nickname didn't stay on the field. Because off the field, Hendricks was strange too. He did weird things. He'd ride a Harley Davidson to practice. He'd wear a cowboy hat instead of a helmet. He'd disrespect coaches. And he'd play pranks on his teammates. But these weren't normal pranks. These were pranks that crossed the line. 1971, Baltimore Colts locker room, game day. Ted Hendricks walked in, but he wasn't wearing his normal uniform. He was wearing a Halloween costume, a skeleton costume. His teammates were shocked. "Ted, what are you doing?" they said. Hendricks laughed. "We're going to die today, so I wanted to be prepared." Coach Don Shula got angry. "Hendricks, take that costume off, now!" But Hendricks didn't care. He went out to warm up in the costume. He ran on the field. The stadium laughed. The opposing team was confused. And then Hendricks went back to the locker room. He took off the costume, he put on his uniform, and he played. In that game, he had 3 sacks. The Colts won, and the Mad Stork legend grew. But this wasn't a one-time thing. Hendricks did stuff like this constantly. In 1973, he was traded to the Oakland Raiders, and the Raiders' culture was perfect for Hendricks. Because the Raiders were the bad boys of the NFL, they broke rules, they were anti-establishment, and Hendricks fit right in. In the Raiders locker room, Hendricks got even wilder. One time he cut teammate John Matuszak's hair while he was sleeping. Matuszak woke up and half his hair was gone. He got angry. He wanted to beat up Hendricks, but Hendricks laughed. "It was just a joke," he said. Another time he cut a teammate's locker with a saw, a real saw. The locker split in 2. Everything inside fell on the floor. His teammate went crazy, but Hendricks just laughed again. In 1974, there was a Raiders-Pittsburgh Steelers game, a playoff game. Before the game, Hendricks rode into the locker room on a horse. Yes, a real horse. Coach John Madden was stunned. "Ted, what is this?" Hendricks responded. "We're Raiders, outlaws. Outlaws ride horses." He left the horse outside the stadium. Then he went to the game. In that game, he had 2 sacks. The Raiders won. This incident went down in NFL history. And on the field, Hendricks looked even crazier. He'd hit opposing quarterbacks. He'd make late hits. He'd get flags. But he didn't care. "I'm here to play football," he'd say, "not to be nice." In the 1976 season, the Raiders won the Super Bowl, and Hendricks was the defensive leader of that team. He had 11 sacks, 4 interceptions, and he struck fear into opponents because nobody knew what he would do. He played outside the system. He was unpredictable, and that made him deadly. But here's where the secret started, because Ted Hendricks looked crazy on the field, but off the field, he was very different. Ted Hendricks had graduated from the University of Miami, engineering degree, with good grades. He was a smart student. He read books. He thought about strategy, and he had deep knowledge about football. Former teammate Art Shell spoke years later. "Ted fooled everyone. On the field, he'd act crazy. But in the locker room, he'd talk strategy. He'd analyze game plans. And most of the time, he knew better than the coaches. He was a genius, but he hid it." Another teammate, Gene Upshaw, agreed. Ted's Mad Stork persona was an act. To fool opponents, they thought Ted was crazy. And they'd get caught unprepared. But Ted calculated everything. One time he was in the Raiders' film room, watching films of the opposing team. An assistant coach was surprised. "Ted, why are you here? Practice is over." Hendricks responded, "I'm studying Pittsburgh's defense, finding their breastplate weak spots." The assistant coach was even more surprised. "But you're a linebacker. Why are you studying offensive defense?" Hendricks explained. "Because when I know their defenses, I know what they expect, and I hit where they don't expect." In 1978, in an interview, a reporter asked Hendricks, "Why do you play so uncontrolled? Why don't you follow the system?" Hendricks responded, "The system slows me down. I follow the ball. Because football isn't complicated. It's simple. Wherever the ball is, you go there. Everyone thinks too much. I don't think. I just move." The reporter was stunned, because this answer seemed both stupid and genius at the same time. So was Hendricks really not thinking? Or was this also an act? Years passed. Ted Hendricks played in the NFL for 15 years. He won 4 Super Bowls. He made the Hall of Fame. And in 1983, he retired. But after retirement, something happened. Hendricks changed. Or maybe he showed his real face, because Mad Stork was gone now. There was only Ted Hendricks, and he was very different. In retirement, Hendricks stayed away from the media. He didn't give interviews. He didn't go to NFL events, and he lived a quiet life. Why? Some said he doesn't need the persona anymore. Some said maybe he really got tired. But some thought something else. Maybe Ted Hendricks was never crazy. Maybe it was all an act. An NFL marketing strategy. Because Mad Stork sold, fans loved him. The media talked about him, and Hendricks benefited from it. In 1995, former Raiders coach John Madden spoke in an interview. Ted Hendricks was hard to coach because he didn't follow the system. But then I realized Ted was smarter than me. He created his own system. And that system worked. Was Mad Stork a mask? Maybe. But it was an effective mask. This statement created a big controversy. Because Madden was implying Hendricks knew everything. He controlled everything. And acting crazy was his strategy. In 2000, a sports psychologist studied the Ted Hendricks case. He published an article. Hendricks didn't have a dual personality. He was a performance artist. He played a character on the field, just like an actor. And that character worked, because opponents didn't take him seriously. But he calculated everything. The article asked, but is this ethical? Is it fair for an NFL player to act crazy? The answer was complicated. 2010, ESPN made a documentary, Raiders the Outlaws, the story of the Oakland Raiders in the 1970s, and there was a big section on Ted Hendricks. In the documentary, former teammates spoke, and what they said was surprising. Fred Biletnikoff, former wide receiver, Ted was the smartest guy. That locker-cutting prank, it was calculated, because the team was tense. Before games, everyone would be stressed. Ted would pull a prank and everyone would relax. This was intentional. Ted was the team's psychologist. Dave Casper, former tight end. Mad Stork wasn't real. Or not completely real. Ted played aggressively on the field. That was real. But it was controlled. He knew where he hit every time. Every move was calculated. But opponents didn't see that. They only saw a crazy linebacker. But the most surprising confession came from John Matuszak, the guy whose hair was cut. He spoke too. At first, I was really mad at Ted. He'd cut my hair. I was going to beat him up. But then we talked, and Ted explained. John, you're too tense. Before games, you're always stressed. I wanted to relax you. Now your hair's gone. But so is your stress. And he was right. I played great in that game. Because I wasn't thinking anymore. I was just playing. Ted knew that. He was a genius. These confessions changed everything, because now it was clear Ted Hendricks wasn't crazy. He was extremely smart. Mad Stork was a strategy to confuse opponents, to relax teammates, and to manipulate the media. Hendricks controlled everything, but nobody noticed, because everyone saw a crazy linebacker. So who was the real Ted Hendricks? If Mad Stork was a persona, who was behind the mask? In a rare interview in 2015, Hendricks himself spoke. He was 70 years old. He was retired. And he had nothing left to hide. Was Mad Stork real? Yes and no. I played aggressively on the field. That was real. Because football is an aggressive game. But I wasn't crazy. I calculated everything. I knew every move. But opponents shouldn't know that. They shouldn't be able to predict me, so I looked uncontrolled. But I was controlled, the reporter asked. What about the off-field pranks? The saw? Cutting hair? Why those? Hendricks laughed. Team psychology. Football isn't just physical. It's a mental game. If your teammates are tense, they play badly. I relaxed them. Sometimes I went too far, but it worked. We won 4 Super Bowls. That's not a coincidence. So what are you really like? Hendricks answered. I'm a calm guy. I like reading books. I like fishing. I like spending time with my family. But on the field, I'm someone else. Because there's a war there. And you can't be calm in war. This interview explained everything. Ted Hendricks didn't have a dual personality. He was just a player who played his role very well. Mad Stork was a performance. And Hendricks made it to the Hall of Fame with this performance. Today, Ted Hendricks is remembered as one of the greatest linebackers in NFL history. 4 Super Bowl championships, 8 Pro Bowl selections, Hall of Fame, and the Mad Stork nickname will last forever. But the question is still there. Was he crazy or a genius? The answer, both. Hendricks was like a crazy person on the field, uncontrolled, unpredictable. But at the same time, he was a genius because this lack of control was calculated, strategic, and it worked. The Mad Stork persona was Hendricks' weapon. It confused opponents, it manipulated the media, and it made him a legend. But was it fair? That's debatable. Some say this is cheating. Some say this is genius. But the result is this. Ted Hendricks won 4 times, and nobody could stop him, because nobody could see the truth. Everyone saw the mask, but behind the mask was the smartest player, and he controlled everything. Modern sports psychologists use Hendricks as an example. The performance persona concept is common now. Many athletes become different characters on the field, but Hendricks was one of the first to do this, and he was the most successful at it.